Okay, so for these next couple of blogs, I'm going to talk about our rehearsals. We're working through the scenes. We often do this in chronological order, but we're going to stick with some that we find particularly hard if we do. I'm basically going to talk about my rehearsal process and some of the scenes in particular. I'm going to go through the scenes in order. We might not have done this in order, but I'm going to go through them in order. And some of the developments, new thoughts I had on the scenes, and new pieces of direction or things that we struggled on or thought that we were good during the rehearsal process. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Scene 1. Scene 1, I'm not in scene 1, so it's basically just my understanding of the characters and the developments of the characters. Now I know a lot more about Carol and John. Scene 1 makes more sense. It has more motivations, more feelings towards it. We talked about how John's character would be feeling hurt but angry, feeling responsible, feeling guilty because he didn't know that this was happening and he was away when Carol tried to kill herself. I think that Carol sees it as not a big deal, and we've learnt that Carol's character is going to build throughout the whole process and throughout the whole of the play, and I think it's going to be slowly building in the sense that she's going to be slowly feeling more desperate to leave the world. Like, even though it starts off with her suicide attempt, in the end she does actually manage to kill herself. So I think that this gradual increase in being desperate and wanting to leave. So in that sense, this scene, we look at it from a different view. So she's trying to escape from the world, but in this sense, probably the most calm scene she's in. And I feel that when she's delivering the lines, it's like not a big deal to her. She's trying to be like, it was an accident, and because she didn't succeed, that's perhaps why she's saying this. But it shows her character and how she actually wanted to leave the world and how that was there from the onset. So there was no new direction in there really, because I wasn't working on that scene, but I think we had a more of an appreciation, and the thoughts and feelings of the scene really set the whole play, and I think it's working really well. The rehearsals for this first scene are going really well. I mean, when we've been watching it. The second scene, again, I'm not in this scene, and this is to do with Carol and John again, mainly Carol on her own on a phone call, and Anna and a character called Dan. This is the first scene with Anna, and it's this weird interaction where she's slightly drunk, and she's talking to Dan, who she'd previously been out with, but she had sex with his 15-year-old brother, which is a really intense part of the scene. I think in terms of development and new learning about for Anna, I think we understand more why, because from hindsight and learning about the whole play, and we've learned about the actual end, so we don't know what the audience feel now because we can't look at it from their point of view because they don't know anything about it, but because we know from hindsight that she's going to kill herself and all this is happening and how the stories are linked, it becomes this more understanding of her motivations to why she is the way she is, so why she had the drug addiction and why she's drunk, why in this scene she interacts the way she does, even though she's quite aware she's still drunk, and a lot of mistakes that she's made in her past that were named because of this, because of what happened to Carol, because of her interaction with her father and stuff. Dan is not a very important character, but is important in the sense that we learn about Anna through Dan. I don't think there was any new direction. I think that they're working on it really well. I thought that the interaction between the two of them was good. I think Sir asked them to be a bit more physical, Anna to be more physical with Dan and to touch him more, and to try and, coerce him, because she's saying we could go back to your house together. And I think that worked well in the rehearsal process. I think it's working well. I think that it needs to be developed a little bit more. The tone of voice seems good, and I think they're doing that scene really well. Now I'm going to talk about my scenes. That's scene 3 and 4. Scene 3, we've been working on quite a bit. Scene 3 is the first scene with all 3 generations going on at the same time. So it's the first one where we have to sort of make sure that the timing is right. We've been working on the timing really well, and we've been finding the scenes easier and the lines easier to do in the cues. Once you know the cues, the lines sort of slot into place, and I think this play is really clever in the way it's written because it can be followed. Even though 3 scenes are going on, it can be followed, and I think it's clever because if the timing's out, it's harder to follow. If somehow we find that, and Chip said that as well, so I think it's something that we're learning throughout this whole process. When it comes to the scene 3 and what else we've been developing the medical routine. Now that's Bonnie that's doing it to Joe, so that's Alex doing that for me. So I'm not really doing it, I just have to react to it more. I was told to feel more pain because I was concentrating on so many other things, like trying to flirt, trying to be awkward, trying to figure out your cues and your lines. You forget that you've got a fish hook in your hand, and because we haven't got the props yet, and we've been working just with like the bandages and other things of the fish hook and not the actual fish hook. So that's been something that we've been practicing a lot, and I think is going better and is going smoother with the other lines, with the entrances of the other character, like on Carol's side especially, because a lot of our lines interject their lines and vice versa. I feel that we need to work on this a little bit more, but I think it's going well. The tone is good, and the whole sequence is good. I think when the timing goes out, you can notice those. That's something that we've got to work on as a group. Then, as scene 3 progresses, I'm not sure what other things that I thought didn't go so well throughout the process. I think I kept delaying my responses, so I'll be waiting for my cues, and I think I can't do that because it makes it look awkward. I want the interaction to be fluid but be a little bit awkward because there's this sort of subtle attraction between the two of them. We developed so that instead of handing Joe a piece of paper with a number, because she says is that a yes, sort of we're going to use a tablet to show also the time gap between the different generations across stage, but also to be a bit different, to be a bit unique, and it'll probably be easier than handing a piece of paper with the number on or anything, because it'll be louder and it'll be easier to take on and off stage when we figure all that stuff out. And finally, in scene 4, scene 4 had less changes. We were thinking about using the fish, how we're going to hold the fish, making sure that the fish was in the hand closest towards the audience. And in terms of like developments and character developments, I think I understand Joe a lot more as a character. I did talk about her as a character. We also looked at and were practicing the interaction and how far away to stand. So some changes were that I was told to stand when we have the doors in place, told to stand more towards the door, and as if I'd just walked in initially, because we talked about how to say the first line, which is hello, whether it was already there and she was waiting for a response, or whether Joe had just walked in and said hello, and we thought it'd be better to walk in and say hello randomly, holding a fish, rather than be standing there and be like, hello. So I learned a lot about how Joe is more friendly but has these levels to her, and I was saying that I've talked a bit about her, my development of her, and I might talk a bit more about her and my feelings toward her after the rehearsal process, or in between the rehearsal process as we go on through the next scenes. So yeah, I feel like Joe and Bonnie in that scene is like the second connection when they're talking about more intimate things, but the intimacy is a bit more awkward still. But I think it's pretty much just as we were rehearsing, to try and get the lines and get it to work and flow well, but not a lot to do with new directions, just new understandings of the characters.